You think Earth is a stable place? You are completely wrong. 5 separate times, our planet has tried to wipe out every single living thing. These are the stories of Earth's 5 greatest apocalypses. But believe it or not, they're also stories about an impossible comeback. Because after each one, a few unlikely survivors crawled out from the wreckage, inherited a broken world, and started the next chapter of life. Our story begins 445 million years ago. The planet today would be totally unrecognizable. The continents were all smashed together, and basically all life lived in the oceans. These oceans were ruled by creatures that look like they're from another planet, like trilobites, which were basically giant armored sea bugs, and they were everywhere. Hunting them were huge squid-like predators with long, pointed shells. This place was wild. But then, the planet itself turned against them. Some hypotheses suggest that as continents crashed together, the fresh, exposed rock acted like a giant sponge, pulling insane amounts of carbon dioxide from the air. This seems to have plunged the entire planet into a sudden, deep ice age. This global cooling was the first domino. As gigantic glaciers grew over the South Pole, they locked up so much water that sea levels dropped like a rock. For all the creatures living in the warm, shallow water, their homes literally disappeared.
Then it got even worse. When the Ice Age finally ended, the glaciers melted and the seas came back. You'd think that's a good thing, right? Wrong. This new water was starving for oxygen, like a room suddenly sealed off from all air. The species that barely survived the cold were now hit with warm, suffocating seas. It was a 1-2 punch of total devastation. Over about 1 million years, 85% of all ocean species were wiped out. The trilobites were decimated, and so many other animals just vanished forever. The survivors were the creatures that could handle the absolute worst conditions, especially low oxygen. What was once a mystery was actually a pattern. When the planet changes faster than you can adapt, you are toast. Fast forward about 70 million years. Life was back, and it had conquered brand new frontiers. This was the age of fishes. The oceans had terrifying new predators, like the Dunkleosteus, an armored fish the size of a bus with a jaw that could crush anything. On land, the first real forests were taking root. It looked like life was winning. But that success may have been the seed for the next disaster. This extinction wasn't one event, but a crisis that lasted for millions of years. A leading theory points the finger at the new plants. As these first giant forests on land died, their decaying matter washed into the oceans. It was like force-feeding the oceans a diet of pure fertilizer. This huge flood of nutrients probably caused massive algae blooms. When that algae died, bacteria ate it all up and sucked all the oxygen from the water, creating planetary-scale dead zones. What we see in polluted lakes today might have happened across the entire world. The oceans became unlivable. The huge, complex reef systems were among the first to go. Their collapse was like pulling the bottom block from a Jenga tower, starting a chain reaction that killed everything that depended on them. Those giant armored fish, including the unstoppable Dunkleosteus, disappeared forever. In the end, this insanely long crisis killed around 75% of all species. So who survived this? Once again, it was the organisms that could handle a nightmare world. On land, the first animals with 4 limbs, our own distant ancestors, were just starting to explore the water's edge. They survived, maybe because their freshwater homes weren't hit as hard as the massive oceans. Life took a huge blow, but its new foothold on land was secure.
We've now arrived at the most extreme crisis in the history of life. 252 million years ago, the planet faced an event so deadly, it's nicknamed the Great Dying. The world was one giant supercontinent, Pangaea, and it was full of life. The ancestors of mammals were the top dogs on land. The world seemed totally stable. But deep underground, a catastrophe was building. In what is now Siberia, a plume of magma the size of a continent began to erupt. This wasn't just one volcano, it was a wound on the Earth's surface that bled lava and gas for hundreds of thousands of years, pumping unimaginable amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The results were a complete nightmare. Global temperatures skyrocketed. The oceans got hotter and lost their oxygen. But this time, there was another killer. The CO2 made the oceans acidic. The water became like a corrosive soda, making it almost impossible for creatures to build shells or skeletons. They faced a triple threat: insane heat, no oxygen, and acid water.
The toll was almost total. It's estimated that up to 96% of all species in the ocean and 70% of vertebrate species on land just vanished. The world left behind was creepy and quiet, dominated by almost nothing but fungus, as if the whole planet was one giant, moldy ruin. So who could possibly survive this? The answer was found in the small and the tough. On land, the survivors were mostly small generalists. A good strategy, used by our own distant ancestors, was to burrow underground to escape the heat and eat whatever they could find. The Great Dying came closer than any other event to sterilizing the entire planet, but it failed. From just a handful of survivors, life would start all over again.
After the Great Dying, life slowly clawed its way back. The Triassic period saw new creatures rise up. The first dinosaurs appeared, but for a long time, they were the underdogs, living in the shadow of giant crocodile-like reptiles. But just as life got its footing, the planet's chaos returned. Around 201 million years ago, the supercontinent of Pangaea started to break apart. As it ripped open, another colossal volcanic event happened, this time in the central Atlantic, pumping huge amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. The pattern was tragically familiar. Global temperatures shot up, and the oceans were thrown into total chaos again. Ecosystems, many of which were still as fragile as a patient recovering from major surgery, just collapsed. The losses were massive. In the oceans, entire groups of animals were wiped out. On land, the giant reptiles that were the dinosaurs' main rivals vanished, leaving a huge opening. It's estimated that around 70 to 80% of all species were lost. So why did the dinosaurs survive and completely take over? The answer is still debated. Some theories say their lungs were like high-efficiency engines that could still run when the air got thick with CO2. Or maybe they were just in the right place at the right time. Whatever the reason, the extinction of their competitors left a massive power vacuum. This extinction literally cleared the board and handed the keys to the dinosaurs.
These events are absolutely insane and show how entire planetary systems can be flipped upside down in an instant, and how life has always had to adapt or get wiped out. The story of Earth is a story of survival. If you find these planetary dramas as fascinating as we do, make sure to smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the history of our world. And let us know in the comments, which of these ancient apocalypses do you find the most terrifying? For 165 million years, the world belonged to the dinosaurs. From T-Rex to the giant sauropods, they dominated every single continent. It seemed like their rule would last forever. Mammals were around, but they were small, mostly hiding in the shadows. And then, a messenger of death arrived from space. 66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly the size of a mountain slammed into the planet near what is now Mexico. The immediate effects were apocalyptic. It blasted a crater over 180 kilometers wide and threw trillions of tons of debris and sulfur into the atmosphere. This cloud spread around the entire globe,
like someone throwing a giant dusty blanket over the planet, blocking all sunlight and plunging Earth into an impact winter. On the ground, it was like pulling the plug on the planet's power source. Photosynthesis stopped, plants died, and the entire food chain collapsed with them. But the horror didn't stop there. Debris falling back from space created a heat pulse that probably set the whole world on fire, like the sky turning into a giant broiler oven. While the asteroid was the main killer, massive volcanic eruptions in India, known as the Deccan Traps, had already been stressing out the global environment, making everything more vulnerable. In the end, an estimated 75% of all species were wiped out. All of the non-bird dinosaurs.
5 times, life on Earth was pushed to its breaking point. 5 times, the planet's own systems, or an object from space, triggered a complete collapse. The cause wasn't just stories of destruction, they're comeback stories. Each mass extinction wiped the slate clean, but never completely. The survivors weren't the biggest or the strongest. They were the most adaptable. The small, the generalists, the burrowers. These humble survivors inherited an empty world, and over millions of years gave rise to the next chapter of life, creating incredible new creatures, including, eventually, us. The story of the 5 extinctions is a humbling reminder of our planet's insane power and life's incredible will to survive. It also shows us that the web of life can unravel with shocking speed. What once sounded like a myth about the world ending turned out to be a real, repeating chapter in Earth's history, with the evidence buried in stone all around us.